Okay, so we have completed making our game scene. We can play our game, and before we start, there's a state, and when we start the game, we can play normally. And if we collide with the pipes or we collide with the ground, then we die. So we have finished our game scene. So now it would be a good idea to make a menu scene, so that we can transition from the game to the menu and from the menu to the game. Okay, so to do that, we're going to go to our project, and we're going to go to our scenes folder, and here this is our sample scene. This is where we have created our game. We're going to rename this to game, so rename the scene to game, and it will ask you to reload. Just hit reload. And okay, so now that we have named our scene, we have named our scene game, we can make sure that everything works fine by playing the game. If here you can say that you can see that game over is okay, we're going to make sure that everything is set. Okay, so now that we have renamed our scene, what we can do is that we can create a new menu scene. So to create a new scene, just right click here in the project view in the scenes folder, select create, and you will have an option to create a scene. It's gonna be over here. So create a new scene, and we'll call this menu. So hit enter, and now we can actually go to our menu. So every time you want to change from one scene to another, if you haven't saved the changes, it will ask you if you want to save the changes. So click yes, save. And now you can see that this is a new empty scene and it has nothing on it. And we want to create something in this scene, something simple, not very complicated. So to do that, we're going to go back to our game scene, and before editing our menu scene, we're going to go to our prefabs folder, and we're going to make sure that we add some prefabs to this folder, so it's going to be easier for us to make our menu scene. So we're gonna get our bird, I'm gonna drag it to the prefabs, and you can see that as soon as we drag the bird to the prefabs folder, the bird becomes a prefab, and this bird becomes blue because it indicates us, this game object becomes blue because it's indicating us that it is a prefab. So one thing we can do is that if we want to convert a prefab into a game object again, what we need to do is that we need to right click on the prefab, and then we select unpack prefab. So select that, because we don't want to actually create prefabs of this bird. We just did it we are just doing it to create the menu scene. All right, and we want to do the same thing with the ground. So you can drag the ground over here, and you can see that now the ground is a prefab. We can just unpack prefab and let the ground be a normal game object. Okay, so now we have the bird and the ground. So now we can go back to our menu scene. So before going back to our menu scene, don't forget to save. And now let's go to our scenes folder and go to our menu scene. And inside here, the first thing that we need to do is that we need to add the background. So let's go to our sprites folder, and from our sprites, let's select the background. Let's drag the background, and we can see that the main camera has the original size. So let's change the camera to 1.2, the size of the camera to 1.2. All right, so now we have this view. Okay, now let's drag in, before dragging in more elements, what we're going to create is that we're going to create a canvas. So we can rename the background to BG, and let's create a canvas. So right click, create UI canvas, and now with the canvas selected, we're going to change the render mode from screen space overlay to screen space camera. We're gonna pass in the camera, and then we're gonna set the sorting layer to canvas, and we're gonna set the UI scale mode to scale with screen size, and set the reference resolution to 900 by 1600, just like we did with our game scene. And we're going to set the match to 0.5. All right, so we have the canvas set up. Okay, now what we have to do is right click on the canvas and select UI image, and this image we're gonna call it title. All right, so now what we can do is change the source image of this title to Flappy Bird. Select or set native size, and now we can just drag it like this. We can make it nice and big so it fits our screen. All right, so we can set the position to 0 on the x-axis. We can put it at this size. That's good enough. All right, so now what we need to do is that we need to add in our bird. So to add our bird, we're going to just drag our bird. We're going to select this sprite, Okay, so we could select a sprite and place it in here, but we created our prefab, remember? So let's go to our prefabs folder and just drag in our prefab like this. We can right click and check and select unpack prefab. And now we have our bird, and our bird has all of these components, but we don't need these components. We only need the animator component. So we're going to remove every other component that the bird has, the rigid body, and okay. So that's basically the sprite renderer and the animator. So now we can place the bird at this position, maybe more or less. And if we play the game, you will see that the bird actually flaps. And that's what we want to do. We want the bird to flap. That's why we created the prefab, so that we don't have to create the animation again. All right. And now what we can do is that we can just drag in the ground, and we can drag in another ground, and we can place the second ground at position 1.68. If you remember, 1.68 is the position that the ground has to be, so that it is right next to the first ground. So now the ground that we have imported here has the move left script because it comes from the prefab. So if you hit play, you will see that the ground repositions. All right, so that's very nice. So we're gonna move our bird a little bit up like this. We're gonna leave some room, some space for the buttons. So now we're gonna right click here in the canvas and select a UI button because we're going to create a button. And every time we create a button, it comes with a text, but we don't need a text, so delete the text. We're gonna call this rate btn, so rate button. We're going to change the source image to rate. So there are two sprites for the rate, but one has the shade on the top and the other one has the shade on the bottom. So we're gonna choose the one that has the shade on the bottom, which is the unpressed sprite. The other one is for when we press the sprite. So we're gonna choose the one that has the shade in the bottom, and we're gonna set native size, and then we're gonna hit the T key or W. We could just drag it a little bit down, then hit T and resize the sprite or the image. In this case, it's an image, a button, sorry. All right, so it's a little bit too big. Maybe just make it like this. All right, so that is pretty good so far. So the next thing that we need to do is to create a play button to go from the menu scene to the game scene. All right, so let's do that. Let's we could just duplicate the rate button like this, and we could drag it down over here, and then we could change just the source image to the sprite button, and we'll select the sprite button with the shade at the bottom and set native size, and then we can just drag it like this. We can make it nice and big, and just make sure that it's at position 0, so you can reposition it from the rect transform here, from the rect transform component in the inspector. So we have the play button, the rate button, and we have our bird over here. Let's make sure the bird is centered. Okay, so we have everything looks pretty nice. But now one thing we can do to make things nicer. Okay, so before making things nicer, change the name of the rate button to play. So play btn. So we know that this is the play button and this one is the rate button. Okay, and now one thing that we can do to make things look better is to select, for example, let's select the rate button, and here in the button component in the inspector, we can see that the transition, it says color tint. So when we press the sprite, a color tint is going to appear, but we don't want this. We're going to select this, and we're going to choose a sprite swap. So now we can see that we have a default sprite, that is the one that we have right now, and then we have an option to choose our pressed sprite. So for our rate button, we're going to choose a pressed sprite, so click this circle, and we're going to choose the rate button that has the shade on top. If you don't see it here in the inspector because it doesn't change, you can see it here. Here you can see another preview in this dialog box. You can see another preview of the sprite that you're selecting. So select the one with the shade on the top, and do the same thing with the play button. Change it from color tint to sprite swap, and select the field pressed sprite, and choose the play button that has the shade on top. All right, so once we've done this, we can hit play, and we can see the result of our hard work and dedication. You can see that everything is going nice. If we press the rate button, you can see that it looks like it is being pressed. which is super nice. The same thing happens with the play button. The only thing that needs to happen now is that we go from this scene to the other scene, but we'll do that in the next video. See you in the next video.